Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special Devex event coming to you live from Neue House, Madison Square, New York City during UNGA78. My name is Richard Jones, Editorial Director at Devex, and together with my colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome our in-person and online audiences to this discussion on transforming education. First and foremost, I'd like to give a big thank you to our partners at New Globe for powering this event today. And to set the scene, before I welcome our first guest to the stage, educational poverty in low and middle income countries has reached a tipping point. Some 53% of children are unable to read and understand a story by the end of primary school. What's required is a transformation of the education sector, still recovering from the impact of school closures during the COVID-19 pandemic. But returning to the pre-COVID status quo is not enough. An ambitious learning recovery and acceleration are needed if we're to have any shot of achieving the SDG 4 on inclusive and equitable quality education for all by 2030. So in the next hour, we're hoping to explore outcomes to help improve the quality of education where it's needed most and shine a light on what's needed to equip everyone from teachers to education ministries with the tools and the data that they need to drive improved learning outcomes for all. So let's get started. I'd like to welcome to the stage Shannon May, President and co-founder of New Globe, and His Excellency AbdulRahman AbdulRazaq, who is Governor of Kwara State, Nigeria, to discuss some solutions to the learning crisis. Shannon, Your Excellency, please take the stage. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Shannon, Governor, welcome to this Devex stage. Perhaps I could go straight in and ask from both of your perspectives to put this in context for us. Why is it so urgent that we tackle this learning crisis, particularly on the African continent? Shannon, perhaps I could go to you first.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sure many of you who've been in different sessions this week have started to hear about the learning crisis, not just on the continent in Africa, but globally. I think it's important, the context there is to put learning into the context of prosperity. This crisis isn't just one of education, it is one of our future prosperity. Every year, 1.7 million youth are entering employment age in Africa, yet more than half of them can't read a simple sentence, can't add 53 plus 17. If that's the future we are left with, it's not as bright as it could be. But there's a different future. In 2035, there'll be more youth entering employment in Africa than in the rest of the world combined. That's a powerhouse if it's empowered. But that's the key. How do we change that? And how do we empower governments and ministries to use their data to make decisions that can actually change how children learn? And that's the context, right? What future do we want is all about what we invest in education today.
And Governor, from your perspective, what's really contributed to this learning crisis? What are the pivotal things that we should be doing urgently to help tackle it?
Oh, thank you very much. It's primarily about funding education, investment in education. That's the key. Last month, I hosted the president of the World Bank, AJ Banga, and invited me to India to see a process where technology was being introduced into education. And he felt that was a way to leapfrog the crisis we're facing now. And as he explained it to me, I told him, well, we have that process in Nigeria, and we're operating it in 3 states. And Basically, it's important to put technology in every classroom, not just every school. Yes, you can have a school with a physics lab, a tech lab, but you need to put technology in every classroom and in the hands of every student. But we don't have the funds to put technology in the hand of every student. That's why it's important to make sure every teacher has a tablet, a technology device to impact the learning processes. Thank you.
So that's the tools, Shannon, but there's also no information currently on the learning levels of 2/3 of children across sub-Saharan Africa. So to achieve our sustainability goals, what data is most important to gather and then to action?
There might be more data than most people realize. I think some of it's hard to communicate, but leaders like His Excellency have focused on making sure that they are measuring how children in their state are learning. Not just taking a broad stroke, but actually enabling people to go and measure the English language arts and mathematics mastery of their children in grades 1 through 6. When you do that, leaders like His Excellency have been able to empower their ministries to then not pretend anymore, right? There might be a 12-year-old who's in grade 6, but that child might not be reading at a first or second grade level. But if you don't know, if you don't have the courage to go and actually see, then you can't act. But in Kwara, where they have gone and they've taken the data on literacy and numeracy for hundreds of thousands of children, they've been able to make those changes. And in one term, they were able to cut the number of non-readers by 1/3. So in a third of a school year, reducing non-readers by over 30%. But that it requires the bravery to be able to admit where you are and then to say, I'm going to do something about it. And so if each government leader can follow the example that are being set by not just His Excellency, but other leaders across Nigeria and the continent, we can take that perception that there's no data, change it to the reality, but to actually act on it.
And specifically at New Globe, what are you doing to assist governments, either at regional or national levels, to tackle this education crisis in practice?
We do a lot of work on assessment to try to ensure governments can understand where their children are. But one of the things that we try to support governments to action that is then to bring in a digital infrastructure that enables the government itself to support its teachers with tablets, with smartphones, with applications that both publish information to them, publish content to them that meets children where they are, but really critically that empowers the ministry with the data to know what's happening so that they can actually see per teacher, per child, what's happening in each classroom, what's happening over time in a year. And as a leader in government, that knowledge is invaluable. You can't govern with kindness or with progress what you don't know. But once you're able to understand what's happening, then you're empowered to make progressive decisions. And so we're really grateful where we have the privilege to work with governments who want to know what's happening and who have the boldness to act on it.
And Governor AbdulRazaq, Shannon mentioned just now the KwaraLEARN program. Before you launched that, education in Kwara State was severely challenged. Could you reflect a little bit on the journey that you've taken since launch in April 2022?
Well, thank you. It was a huge challenge when we took over in 2019. Then came the COVID pandemic, and we had to see what we'll do in the state. So we have peer review with other states, and majorly went around the states to see which states were doing well in education. And then we found out that it was the states, Lagos and Edo states, that Globe was in that were doing well. So quite surprisingly so. So then we started shopping around for the best partners to put technology in schools. And it was a no-brainer to settle for Globe. Now, it's not just education only. I don't know why the development agencies are not jumping onto this. World Health Organization, because you can easily take data for malnutrition from the kids from the schools, data on agriculture, out of school kids. So technology is a must in this school. We really have to do it and expand the scope of it.
And so the aim of the program was to transform government primary schools across the entire state, making them more data-driven, using instructional learning, 360-degree support systems for schools, teachers, and pupils. What did that look like in practice, and what were some of the results that you saw in some cases within just a few weeks?
Well, attendance shot up. Teachers were now more interested in teaching. It's just mainly about attendance. In some cases, we had 46% improvement in attendance. Kids wanted to now go to school and learn more. They wanted to know what a tablet is, see the tablet working. So the curriculum also, a teacher can come to the classroom and freestyle and say, oh, I learned physics, I graduated in physics. So that teacher will most likely teach 50% physics all the time. So you really can't freestyle. What you teach the students is on the tablet, so you're guided rightly. And really, I must say, it's just the way to go. Thank you.
And so you've spent domestic budget from your state on education. You've invested in the future of your state, in the pupils that make up the future of the state. Right now, international finance institutions are talking about the need to localize development programs. What would you say to the likes of UNICEF, to USAID, to the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in the United Kingdom and others about how to localize aid? What would be your key message?
It should be a challenge to localize it to start with, but it'll be good for them to work with companies that invest in this item. We're not saying hand over money to states for them to develop their programs. No. You look at the track records, what has been done, what is being done, and what has been done, and then you take it from there. But really, the trajectory, if you look at the development world today, you have aging population. We have the youths that will move the globe forward. Now, what we really need to do is to have trained youths, well-trained youths. If we don't have them, it will be a challenge. India recently moved 10 million people out of poverty through education, and that's 10 million is more than the size of the population of many countries today. If you compare the size of India over 1 billion, and say 10 million is insignificant, it's not. And that's what we want to do, move a lot of people out of poverty through education.
Thanks very much for the perspectives. Perhaps as time is a little short, I can ask both of you for your perspectives, as I think we'll be asking our panelists as well, our audience watching at home. Have your say online in the chat function during audience Q&A. Get some questions ready, and we'll come to as many as time allows. But the world is significantly off track in terms of missing its targets on Sustainable Development Goal 4 on education. Perhaps you could give us one or two thoughts, Shannon, first to you, on what's really needed to get us back on track. And then once we're back on track, to really accelerate progress towards 2030. What needs to be done immediately?
I think immediately, those in development finance institutions should pay attention to programs that are working in states that have had the courage to implement them.
And double down.
But through measuring, proving, and then seeing what can happen. So like in His Excellency's state, prior to his investments, the learning levels within Kwara State were similar to those of the Republic of Congo. Now, children in his state are learning similar to the levels of English language, of literacy, as Peru. That is a radical change, right? He's outperforming the education levels that his GDP would predict. Similarly in Lagos went before the Governor Samuel Olu and started investing in his teachers, developing professional development, investing in the content in his schools. They were performing like Chad. That was their peer. Now they're performing similar to Mexico. To be able to outperform your GDP per capita means that very quickly, rather than waiting a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations for economic change to slowly trickle down to your schools, if you invest in your schools now, you can leapfrog and have 2035 and the years leading up to it and after it be years of prosperity, of youth development and youth contribution, rather than a pretty scary unknown. And so I think it's, we're halfway to the SDGs, right? But we're not halfway to failure if you look at specific examples. So I think we need to look at case studies where there have been, there are effective work happening out there, not just here, elsewhere, and not get discouraged, but be rigorous, be harsh on ourselves of like trying to look for what is working, where is it working, why is it working, and then focus on that rather than be like, oh, I don't know, I hope something nice happens in the next 7 years. We need to act with more urgency, more rigor, and to just work harder.
Thank you, Shannon. And Governor AbdulRazaq, would you echo that call for urgency and action?
It's the urgency of now. I'll give you an example. Over 4 years ago, we had slightly over 350 medical doctors. Today, we have less than 100. They've all moved abroad. So you see, we really need to bridge that education gap now, and we need the tools to bridge it very quickly.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time. So, Shannon, Your Excellency, Governor AbdulRazaq, thank you very much for joining us on the Devex stage today. Big round of applause, everyone. Thank you very much.